Hey, this is Writers Row. I'm DC Wright-Hammer, and we've got a special guest on the show today. We're going to dive into that in just a moment. Before we do, if you like the channel and you've been watching our content, please give this video a thumbs up and go ahead and click that subscribe button down below. You'll get updates when we post videos, and it helps out the channel, so we would really appreciate it. With that said, the special guest for this episode is Patrick Johnson. He is a writing community member, an author with several books that we'll talk about. And the topic of this show is writing and drinking. Why are those two, why do they go together so much? Cheers. Why are so many writers drinkers? Why is drinking and writing, it just goes together like ham and cheese? And so we'll talk about that. Before we get into that, I do want to just say, always drink responsibly. This episode is not to glorify binge drinking or anything like that. We understand that there are people in the community who struggle with alcoholism, either themselves, friends, or family, and we do want to be sensitive to that. The main topic is to just talk about the relationship between writing and drinking and see where it goes. And with that, Patrick, thank you for coming on. Why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself, and then we'll dig in.
Well, I'm Patrick F. Johnson. I'm sorry, Patrick F. Johnson. And I'm a sci-fi writer and a beer drinker. I don't drink as much as I used to because I'm married. I have 4 children.
Yep.
And I've, you would think it would make me drink more, but no, I've actually cut back. So as far as drinking and writing, everyone thinks of Hemingway.
Yep.
And I'm going to be completely honest, I don't know crap about Hemingway.
Even if you don't know a historical writer or the stereotype is there, right? It's a glass of wine and let me pump out this chapter. It's, I'm editing, so I need a glass of the hard stuff. It's, there's even, I think, there's a hard alcohol I haven't gotten myself, or is it a wine? Either one. It says Writer's Tears. That is the name of the alcohol. I've seen it all over Twitter. I'll have to try it sometime. Hashtag not sponsored. But if Writer's Tears wants to get a hold of me and sponsor Writers Row, I would not be mad. So tell us, Patrick, your relationship with alcohol and writing. Where do the two meet? Where have maybe, having a drink or two benefited you? Where has it maybe hindered you? And just kind of talk to us about that.
Well, I started writing seriously in 2017. And before that, the only thing I ever wrote was songs. So if I would write a poem, it would become a song. So getting together with the boys, jamming out some new material or even rehearsing, you'd have some beers. And that was just the usual thing. So after the band thing ended, I was trying my hand at music production. So I would sit down in my recording room, which at my last house, I don't have that luxury where I'm currently living, but I'd sit down there and have some beers and just do various experimentations with mic placements and recording, and that was just it. So I don't do it every time, but every other time.
Did you find transitioning into writing fiction, did it take some kind of courage where the alcohol took the edge off, and so to take yourself seriously, did you need that extra sort of liquid courage in you to just, I'm going to write fiction? Or, how did that turn out?
To be honest, there's a full detachment there. I'm naturally extroverted. I don't need courage to do much of anything. I was also a BMX rider. Yep. So, and I started writing vert. So I was the guy, I would pedal as fast as I can to hit a ramp. Wow. Didn't always end well, but so the courage, it's not a courage thing at all. It's totally, nothing to do with it. Although one time, I got to tell you, we were getting ready to play a show. Mm-hmm. It was an all ages show. Okay. So we show up, we set up, we did a sound check, and then we're like, it's a little off. What's wrong? We just didn't feel right. Bass player's like, hold on. He went down the street, came back with a 6-pack. We all had a beer. They're like, okay, now we're good. It's like when you study and you're chewing gum. You need to chew gum when you take the test. That's how it was.
I can honestly say that I might have a drink or something with writing, but having those two, like you said, there hasn't been for me much of a connection as much as the stereotype might have it. You know, it's kind of like life though. So when I would finish a draft, I would celebrate, you know, and I'd have a drink or something like that. When I finally published, my wife actually bought me, and she gave me a bottle of bourbon to celebrate publishing my first book. And I still have that bottle. I haven't opened it yet. And so it's kind of funny how, you know, alcohol has this whole cultural side to it, and that is probably emphasized more by the stereotype of alcohol in writing and things like that. And so when we become writers, we sort of inherit that stereotype. And to some extent, there's a little bit of self-fulfilling prophecy there of, if I'm a writer, I might have to do a little bit of drinking. It's just kind of what you do.
But you also have to drink coffee. And you have to have a cat.
Check.
I'm allergic to cats.
Oh no.
So I have
so
a dog.
You're not really a writer then, is that what you're trying to tell me, Patrick?
I'm 66.6% writer.
Oh, okay. You're on the wrong show. I don't know how to tell you that. Just kidding. But it's funny how these stereotypes permeate. I think I've maybe written a handful of chapters where I was truly like inebriated. I've had maybe one too many, and I actually wanted to dig in and start writing. For me, they're almost competing ideas to some extent, in that when I write, I want to escape into my world where I have control over everything. And when I drink, I kind of want to escape a little bit from the real world and not have too much control, but still feel, you know, safe and relaxed and, you know, all that stuff. And so that's where, for me, I don't, maybe I'm 66.6% a writer as well, because the writing and the drinking, I was drinking long before I was a writer, and it just kind of came in a little bit here or there. But I do actually try to keep them pretty separate in that sense.
Well, I've had plenty of, in 2017, I was writing, I did 3 full-length novels. Mm-hmm. So a total of 270,000 words.
Yeah.
So I wasn't like smashed the whole time. And my little secret is I never get drunk.
Okay.
I don't drink enough to where I'm going to have a hangover, because I have a day job.
Right.
I want to go hungover. So I'll drink beer, but not enough to, so I'm never full blown drunk when I write, because that would suck. Yeah. Writing would suck. It sucked when I was trying to record songs. You could tell, like, hey, this would happen after 1 a.m. So just don't even listen to that, because it's going to suck. Never had one sound good. So there's that sweet spot that, hell, there's nights where I'll sit around and eat ice cream or eat Hershey Kisses while I write. So
yep. If a writer's watching this and they're like, oh yeah, definitely got to have the wine, or definitely got to have the drinks or whatever, moderation is key always. Writing is no different. And the jokes we made, you're not less of a writer if you're not having a drink with writing or celebrating or doing anything. And again, as I said at the beginning, people struggle with alcoholism. They struggle with real life, and, they don't want to have drinks interfere with their ability to do anything, and they, whatever it is. What I think is interesting is that so many of the greats, like we talked about, Ernest Hemingway, Truman Capote, several other ones, if mostly you hear about the alcoholism or some other kind of mood-altering drug. And I think back in those days when you could live off of a little bit here or there. If you got anything published, it meant you could have a modest living and you could be under these influences and continue to write. I think it's really covering up for, there's extroverted writers, there's introverted writers, but we all kind of go to a different place when we write. We all take ourselves to whatever we're writing, and what I think is for some of those greats, I think they were really tormented. That's not necessarily true of all of us today, but a lot of them were misunderstood. A lot of them were, they believed things that weren't necessarily accepted generally. They had lifestyles that the time did not catch up with their lifestyles. They were living ahead of their time in that sense. And it was not accepting of people as much as we are today. We've still got a long way to go with accepting of people, but I think alcohol was a way of people dealing with, and writers dealing with not fitting in their time.
Yeah, I can totally see that. But at the same time, I don't believe we have to suffer for our art. If I'm misunderstood, that's fine with me,
Yep.
So it's never been a crutch, so to speak. But I enjoy writing. Never had tears over it. Even if I write a sad scene, it's fiction. I separate that. I try to put as much heart into it, but I don't let it get me down. And so many people, Twitter, you see people complaining about this or that, the process. I like every part of the process. I even like marketing.
Well, you do marketing in an interesting way, so I don't think that's necessarily. I don't think that's fair. I think you do great marketing. It is not a criticism. I'm saying your marketing is a little different than others, and that's a good thing.
I don't know if you ever noticed, I don't use hashtags.
Right.
Because everyone else uses hashtags.
Okay.
So if it takes a puppet show to be different, I'm going to do a puppet show.
Got it. Oh, because you did a puppet show.
I did a puppet show.
Yeah.
Mrs. Johnson was gracious enough to assist me with that. So.
Right. And so I think being different's okay. You don't have to drink your differences away in your mind. You don't have to rationalize them. Be who you are as a writer. Be who you are as a person. And let drinking just be, in the end, is it good for people to drink at all? Probably not. Is it more of like a poison? Maybe. The argument can be made for that scientifically.
Definitely poison.
But culturally speaking, it's acceptable to drink in moderation and things like that. And so, the writers that are watching or anything like that, be yourself. Just, whatever that means. And if you have I always hear about like writers who are, they do their pitches, they're querying, and they get rejected. And there's a lot of it's a tough thing to experience. As an independent author, I've never experienced rejection quite like that. I've just self-published my books myself, did it all myself, and just got it out there. But even with that, I'd have a family member who would pick up the book and say, yeah, it's not quite for me. Have a bad review pop up and say, yeah, this book isn't that great. And there is some, it does hurt, quote unquote, if you will. Obviously, we move on from that. But those are some of the typical triggers you might think if somebody has a propensity to drink, or if they drink to escape or to try to mitigate their feelings. And I think that's where writing and drinking is there's a parallel there. And, there's better ways to deal with it than just, turning to the bottle or turning to a beer. If that's the reason you're drinking, you need to probably talk through that and maybe figure something out.
There's an old saying in this part of Indiana: if you can't drink, don't drink. If you have issues with it, then obviously it's not for you. If if it's outside of your control,
Yep.
you need help with it. If you can't stop, if you have to have it first thing in the morning, for instance. So now my issue with it is I get busy, and before I know it, the beer's gone.
Yep.
So I count them as I go. So I combat that by only buying a certain amount. So when it's gone, it's gone. Then I'm done, and that keeps me from overdoing it, and I'm good. And it's been that way ever since I was doing music, and I was doing music nightly. I mean, I was mad with it, okay? And I wouldn't pay attention. Before I knew it, I was drunk. So I started only buying a certain amount. That way, you know, if it means a trip to the beer store every time I want to drink, then so be it. It keeps me out of trouble.
You and I both have families and day jobs, and just we want to be functional people. And so if we get time to write, we should take that time and be as productive as possible. If our, you know, spouses allow us the time to write, we should take the time to write. And we shouldn't also take the time to, you know, get drunk and, you know, have that affect us that night, in the morning, and whatever it is. So really dividing those two, if you want to have a beverage or two, fine. But again, keeping it under control. And the main goal is to be the best writer you can be. And typically, when you're under the influence, for some people, they get a little more creative and it gets the juices flowing, and maybe it removes inhibitions and things like that. But in general, if you have, like you said, a crutch, if you have the need to have a beverage in order to be a writer, there's some kind of disconnect there that you need to figure out.
You know, I keep going back to music because I did that most of my life. And so many of the guys had some type of crutch. So I've seen it get pretty ugly. And so I've always watched it, watched it carefully. I didn't want to get there. So I still drink, but I'm down to maybe 2 nights a week, maybe.
Yep.
And not enough to be hungover at work. But I tell you what works even better than drinking and writing. Don't sleep. I have about 4 kids, so you don't drive, you don't do anything until they go to bed. You don't drink beer, you don't write, and then as they get older, they stay up later and later. So then you don't start writing until like 11 or 12. Okay, so then you write for a couple hours, then you go to bed, get up at like 6 or 7, go to work. You do that for like a week, and then sit down and write. You're going to have some bonkers ideas. I mean, insanity. So that's it. You want to be creative, just don't sleep.
And that is the secret to writing science fiction, not sleeping.
Yes.
No, but I can definitely relate. We've got our kids, they're younger, and they're on such a cycle right now that we do get an hour to an hour and a half, starting at about 8, 9 o'clock at night. And we rotate every night. I take one night, she takes the other night, and we go back and forth every night when that's possible. And that allows us to both get a break, and allows me to do things like Writer's Row or write or whatever I want to do for the night, and go from there.
State of the world.
Oh, right.
I've not been able to write much because of the whole coronavirus pandemic.
Yep.
Stressed out. I got 4 kids. Jobs looking pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've got maybe 500 words in the last 3 weeks. So it's been rough. I mean,
yeah, I did a video talking about how it's scary. It's weird. I went to the first time I went to the grocery store after being indoors for 10 days, and then we finally ran out of some key stuff. It's weird, and yeah, definitely not writing. I haven't been drinking a lot every night, but I have found myself each night wanting to have more to drink to, again, take the edge off of everything that's happening. No, I can't think of anything in history that is even remotely similar to this. I'm glad we have a plan. I'm glad there's a plan. It might have been implemented a little late, but we have a plan. And we'll see. How are how else are you guys doing? Um, just
Well,
surviving at this point?
I'm working from home.
Hmm.
My job is scheduled in 1st of May anyway. So
Okay.
with all the unemployment, I'm going to be a little late to that game. Maybe they'll process it faster at that point after everyone else is out of the way. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting trying to find work for everyone who's out of work.
Yeah.
So it's, but hey, we're all in it together.
Yeah. There is this sense of unity where we all kind of get it. It's not like a hurricane in Florida or an earthquake in California or whatever happens in New York. It's we're all in it, and even the states that haven't officially said stay at home, people are still doing that. They're still staying home as much as they can. And certainly, you can step outside here or there to get some exercise a little bit, walk your dog, but stay safe. The biggest thing about going out right now is to not get injured, to not like hurt yourself. So you have to go to the hospital, and then you're totally disrupting everything from the hospitals to exposing yourself to being, all kinds of stuff like that. So um, it's it's interesting times. I'm definitely keeping an eye on my drinking as a result of it. It is stimulating thoughts in my mind about writing sci-fi. Interestingly enough, in my Between Two Minds series, there is a lung disease that I had created called spotted lung, and it actually had two starting points in the world. One was Hong Kong, and one was Brazil. They started on basically the same day. But a reader was the one that actually brought that to my attention, that I had imagined a pandemic. I accidentally called it an epidemic in the book, but epidemic is very isolated to a particular region. Pandemics are worldwide, as we're seeing. But it's just interesting how everything comes together. When I write more hard science fiction, speculative science fiction, it's just kind of crazy. It's not as similar to. So what it did was it actually made the infected addicted to pollution. It made them crave their lungs. They wanted to breathe it in to feed the organism that was feeding off of the pollution. Um,
Enjoying
and
it. I love it.
what's that?
Love it. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So there was one scene where people are just walking into traffic to suck on tailpipes because they have to get that pollution to take the pain away in their lungs. And just that scene was fun to write. It was very much inspired by like zombies and Walking Dead style, like people doing things that are crazy and they're completely out of their minds because their bodies are taken over. And so,
I mean, that right there, you put all that in a blurb. There's like people are gonna. I gotta read that. So,
yeah,
dude, that's
it's
great.
well, it's a side tie. Like I tried to not make it a darling. That was the problem with it, is that it fit really well for. I had to describe it a little extra because some of the main characters had this disease, and it's not even the central. It's not the focal point of the book. It's sort of this thing that's also part of it. Um, but when the reader tweeted me, I had forgotten about it. The reader's like, "Hey, you totally called this pandemic," and I reread it, and like it's only like I don't know, 50% similar, but it was just kind of cool that someone connected those dots. Well, let's wrap up this episode for now. I really appreciate you coming on, Patrick. I'm definitely going to be linking your books, all that in the description down below. Any parting words before we wrap it up?
Well, I've been doing this thing where I haven't been posting my own links. Now, if other people post them, I'll retweet them. But I would, instead of promoting myself, I want everyone to buy works, books, art, whatever from independent writers, musicians, authors who are hardest hit by, current events. And I mean, I'm fine for now.
Yep.
So just help someone who needs it because we're all in this together.
Appreciate
Now
it.
here in about a month, when I'm unemployed, my story was probably going to change. But for now, help out the other guys. Help me out a month.
Yep.
I see two awesome posters behind you there.
Oh, right. Yeah. I talk about those enough. They're on special, but only till like the end of the week. So probably after this video is posted, that'll probably be over. But no, really appreciate you coming on, and thanks everybody for watching. We'll catch you next time.